You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, the 18th of January. A Romanian Big Issue seller with 4 children has won an extra £2,600 a year on her benefits in Britain. A 19-year-old immigrant named as Alimiri Cezmi has been jailed for raping a 31-year-old British woman at knifepoint. More reports of unemployment are forecast for Britain. The European Court for Human Rights has given Britain another slap across the face when it refused to allow Britain to be able to deport a radical Muslim cleric. Russia has spoken out about the issue of supplying Syria with arms during the country's mounting crisis. At least 5 police officers have been killed in Iraq. And thought for the day. UK news. A Romanian Big Issue seller with 4 children has won an extra £2,600 a year to her benefits in Britain. Already claiming £25,500 a year, she was not able to claim the extra housing benefits until now. Faruta Vasil, aged 27, who was able to use the court system including an interpreter free of charge, lost her previous claim for extra housing benefit, but the judge overruled it. She now claims over £30,000 a year in Britain, while our pensioners freeze to death. She is also allowed to earn £100 a week selling the Big Issue. Miss Vasili, who is single with 4 children, explained that she uses her own money to buy the Big Issues to make a profit, placing herself in category 3 of the system. Miss Vasili claims £326 in tax credits, £60 in child benefits and a disability living allowance of £49 and a carer's allowance of £55, plus over £25,000 a year in other benefits and also the latest £2,600 in housing benefits. Not bad for a single mother of 4 who is virtually begging. Get the bowls out, my friends. A 19-year-old immigrant named as Alimiri Cezmi has been jailed for raping a 31-year-old British woman at knifepoint. This immigrant from northern Cyprus will be deported after his jail term for what has been called a vicious and callous crime. Wearing a bandana, the 19-year-old jumped out of the garden onto a footpath and dragged her into a garage. Police arrested Alimiri Cezmi that evening. Police say that the woman may not be the only victim and have urged other victims to come forward. More reports of unemployment are forecast in Britain. Statistics show that as more cheap labour comes into the country, more British workers are finding themselves on the unemployment list. Mass redundancies are expected for some long-term British workers as a second recession is forecast. Unemployment has it at a 17-year high, it is reported today. Although it would be foolish to put down this figure totally to massive immigration, the government's policies or lack of them regarding immigration, deportation and illegals certainly do not help this figure. Euronews. The European Court for Human Rights has given Britain another slap across the face as it has refused to allow Britain to be able to deport a radical Muslim cleric, Abu Qatada. It is said that Abu Qatada is possibly the main source of radical Islamic teaching in Britain and a massive inspiration for Al-Qaeda supporters. These sleepers have been deliberately placed around Europe by the Marxist agenda. The European Court for Human Rights has ruled that although Abu Qatada is a terror suspect, it would infringe his human rights to remove him from our country. This Human Rights Act was invented in Europe by European scholars, amongst whom was a French Zionist and a representative of the Arab League. In short, it was set up attempting to define an aspiration of rights as opposed to real legal rights. Unfortunately, Britain adopted it, and it has effectively tied its own hands behind its back, because it now comes under its auspices, resulting in the fact that Britain has now become a safe haven for terror suspects and a breeding ground for more homegrown terrorists. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has said that he will discuss any dispute over his country's new laws. The situation came into place when the EU had a problem with Hungary wanting independence of its central bank. Will this lead to another split in the Eurozone? World news. At least 5 police officers have been killed in Iraq. The police officers were from the new security force that is in place to keep the peace now the Western military has gone. The bomb blast is one of the many by militant and radicalised Muslims against the regime change. Russia has spoken out about its issues of supplying Syria with arms during the country's mounting crisis. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Russia does not have to explain why it sells arms to Syria and that the United States deserve no explanation on the actions of the arms trade. In a radio interview this week, the Israeli Minister for Defence has said that any attack on Iran would be very far away. The official, Ehud Barak, spoke out on military radio station about the issue. The occupying protesters in the US have landed themselves in trouble again. This time a protester had been throwing smoke bombs onto the lawn at the White House. The protesters had gathered outside the gates of the White House when the incident took place. A party spokesman commented, "What is it about protesters nowadays? They seem to think they have a God-given right to cause trouble and mayhem and indeed literally topple well-established governments. Protesters are radicals of whatever they are protesting for and have to be curtailed for public safety if they overstep the boundaries." Thought for the day. Well, here I am on the poor Gurkhas again. They claim that they should be exempt from the government cuts being inflicted on members of the armed forces. The claim is that they are being unfairly targeted for these cuts after the Ministry of Defence announced 1 in 10 posts in the brigade will be axed. Forgotten are the other victims of these cuts. Long-serving British members will be axed in much greater numbers than this mercenary force, with its hundreds of dependents in this country. The numbers are grim. Up to 2,900 members of the Army, 1,000 members of the Royal Air Force and 300 members of the Royal Navy, including military top brass, will be made redundant in the latest round of government cuts. The MOD confirmed 400 Gurkhas with more than 6 years' service in the 3,500 strong brigade will lose their jobs. I say they are lucky to be holding on to around 3,000 of them. They have certainly been treated much better per capita than the rest. Lumley is of course in the news again bleating about the tragedy of it. I think she is best ignored and should stick to comedy, which is what this is turning into. Actress Joanna Lumley, a leading campaigner on the Gurkhas' rights, warned that compulsory redundancies would be a tragedy. The ironic thing is that since Lumley's crusade started, the Gurkhas now have to serve a minimum of 22 years as opposed to 15 to bring them in line with the rest of the army personnel, but is now considered overmanned by the military planners. One Gurkha has stated that this is a very unfair decision by the Ministry of Defence. He also claims it is discrimination towards Gurkhas. My statement? Get on with it. You're mercenaries. You wanted to be equal, if not better than serving British soldiers. You wanted all your relatives to join you. You wanted and you got. And if you are now considered overmanned, then it is Lumley's fault, and perhaps you should remove her from the status of goddess before any more damage is done. If you can't stand the heat, stay out of the kitchen. I do know that few people living around the areas in which you have settled your clans would be sorry to see you go back to your mother country. And finally, the company that manufactures Marmite, also known as Yuck Spread, and who tried to cripple the British National Party during election time, is having big problems over its pensions. Strikes are being held at Unilever's factories by its workers along with the 3 anti-British unions. So if you have no Marmite left to smear on your dustbin to keep the flies away this summer, buy yourself a frog. And please remember that Unilever make not only Marmite but Lynx deodorant, Wall's ice cream, pot noodles, all Persil products, Flora, PG Tips and boycott the lot. Well, our news writer is clearly not a lover of Marmite, but I do love it, and it always brings back memories of hot toast after school in the winter. However, Unilever is probably the main producer and distributors of dubious and animal-tested gumph that I would not want to eat or put on my face. You have been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.